Hello and welcome in. Mark here, aka the Markster. This is video number 75 in the FreeCAD series. Today we're going to take our first look in the series at the MeshRemodel workbench. And we'll use that to remodel this object that we worked on in the previous video. We're going to remodel this into FreeCAD boundary representation format. So before we get started with that, let's take a look at which version of FreeCAD I'm using. This is hot off the presses. I just downloaded it earlier today. This is 0.19 development release, the pre-release development version, revision number 22266. I'm on Windows 10, 64-bit, and this is one of the Conda builds. So the MeshRemodel workbench is one that I put together last August in fact. It wasn't quite ready, and I've been working on it here in the last few weeks, trying to make some improvements to it. So I think it's in a usable state at this time. You need to install MeshRemodel from the add-on manager. So Tools, Add-on Manager, in the Workbenches section, look for MeshRemodel, and you see I've already got it installed. And once you do that, you'll need to restart and go to the Workbench. Now in the settings, I recommend that you have the setting keep the toolbar active. So this, where the asterisk is what the current setting is. So you have the option to keep the toolbar active or do not keep it active. And what this does is the toolbar will follow you when you switch workbenches. So I'm going to go to Part Workbench and look right here where my mouse is. The toolbar follows me. So I have access to the toolbar commands from within the other workbench. So the way the MeshRemodel workbench works is first we create a reference object, which can be a points object or a wireframe or a cross section. So we select the STL, which is in a mesh format. Now notice when you click on an STL, you cannot select an individual edge, vertex, face. You just either you selected the object or you don't. So we need reference points to be able to click on. And in this particular case, I'm going to make the wireframe. So now we've got a wireframe object. Let me hide the original mesh, and you can see that it's kind of like being in wireframe viewing mode. Another thing we can do, let me hide that one, is we can make the points object, and this gives you all the vertexes, and these can be selected. So first you create that reference object, and then you use these tools here, the point creation tool, the line creation tool, the polygon, the B-spline, circle, the arc. So these are the basic elements that we can create based on the selection of these reference points or reference edges, whichever one we decide to use. And this time I'm going to use the wireframe because I think it's just a little easier to select edges than it is to select the points. So we'll create the edges, then we'll wire them up into wires, and then create a face from the wires, and then extrude or sweep or loft or revolve the face. So we need to understand what a wire is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But first, I'm just going to select these edges here, holding down the Control key. I'm in Blender navigation, so I need to hold Control. Oops, hit the wrong one there. Need to hold Control to do the multiple selection. You can use the edges or you can use points. And what we're going to do here is create the edges. So I'm going to stop there and use the Polygon Tool here. Now you'll notice on the tooltip, Shift plus click to not close the polygon. So I don't want to close it because it's not going to be a closed shape just yet. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click it. And this creates all these lines here. And they're already pre-selected for us. So we can use the Upgrade tool next. That creates a wire. If it's successful, which it was not. Why was it not successful? Perhaps they were not all coplanar. Ah, right here. So I'm going to delete this edge. I'm just going to wire these remaining. Select them all, upgrade. Now in the report view, and I recommend that you leave the report view active, which if it's not active for you, the view menu, panels, report view, enable that because it gives good information. When it's successful, I got this message, found edges, wiring them. And when it was not successful, I got this message, unable to upgrade these objects. So because we were successful, now we have a wire. And I'm going to press delete and delete all those lines that I just made because I don't need them anymore. I have the wire. And let's show the wireframe again. You might remember in the last video, this little edge caused a problem with the STL. So I'm going to select that point and then come down here and select this point, create a single edge there. Then I'll select this edge and make an edge there. Let's hide the wireframe. Now we can see a little more what we're doing. And I'm going to select right around here and create a point on that line. And what I want to do is line this point up with this point here so we can have a straight edge coming down. Notice when I pre-select this point, look at the status bar down here where my cursor is at. When I pre-select that point, it gives me the X, Y, and Z coordinates of this point. And so it's 24.5 is the X coordinate. So that's what this point needs to be. 24.5, 3 O's 51. 24.5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1. So that moves the point to where it should be spot on now. Still a little crooked. Oh, I moved the wrong value, that's why. I moved the Z instead of the X. Let me undo that. Undo the X, 24.50051. Okay, let's try this again. So the reason I'm doing this instead of going all the way across is, remember in the last video, if you watched it, we cut this in half. That was the change that we made. So I'm going to do it as I'm remodeling the object. Now I'm going to delete this edge. I only wanted it temporarily to set this point on that edge. So I'm going to delete it and create a new one from here to here. Now we've got a complete closed wire, or at least we're ready to make one. So we select all of our edges. We don't select the point. Upgrade that to a wire, and then we can delete those, and we can delete the point. And now we can upgrade this wire to a face, and then delete the wire. I like to delete those to keep the tree clean, because if we need these the edges, we can downgrade this. So hold your mouse over the toolbar icon and see that Control plus click runs downgrade. So this runs draft workbench upgrade and draft workbench downgrade if you hold the Control key. So as a matter of fact, I do want to make another change. I want to angle this, bevel this down a little bit. It's something I forgot to do in the previous video. So I'm going to downgrade this, holding down Control, and I'll hide the face, or I'll just delete it, and then downgrade the wires into edges. So now we have all these edges, and I'm going to add some points. I'm going to add one about here, and I'll add one about here. Then I'll delete these edges and recreate them. There we are. So you can use point to point, or you can use the edges, but you can't mix them during the same creation of the same polygon. And I did not want it closed, so I'm just going to delete that line. Alright, and then we'll wire these together again. Select these new lines, and shift key down, select all these. Let's skip the points and upgrade these to a wire. Delete those. Delete the points, we don't need them anymore. Upgrade the wire to a face. It's black, but it's silver on the other side. Doesn't matter. Alright, now let's show the original object again. So we can extrude this face back to reach this wall here. But how far do we need to go? Another option is we could sweep along one of these edges, but I recommend extrude instead of sweep because it's going to be more parametric. If you decide later on you wanted this to be longer in this direction here, then you could just change that extrude value, or you could extrude in both directions. You'd modify the length property of the extrude object. But we don't know how far this is, so we can measure this with the ruler tool here, the tape measure tool, or let me clear this. or we can just create an edge temporarily. And notice in the report view, this line length I just created is 10 millimeters long, slightly longer. So this is 10 millimeters from this face to this face here. So I would like to extrude into this wall here a little bit. So I'm going to make it 10.1 millimeters. And I'll delete this line. Don't need it. I just wanted it for a measurement. So we use the extrude tool on the face. And 10.1 millimeters we'll apply and close. Now if we hide the other stuff, you see what we have so far. So the next step then is to make this next wall here. So I'm going to slide this back around, and I'll use point to point to create this face. Select each vertex, and I'll come down here to this bottom one and then make our polylines. Upgrade those to a wire, delete them. Upgrade the wire to a face, delete the wire. Then we hide some of this other stuff and we see the face that we just made. Now how long does that need to be? We can take this line here, make a line off of it to see. Length is 0.99, so it's 1 millimeter. And I'll make it also one. Well, I don't want to make it longer. I'll make it just 1. Let me delete that line, I don't need it. So we'll extrude it 1 millimeter. And close. So now if we look what we have so far, we have the first wall made and the rack. And now we have one more to make, this one back here. So I'll show my wireframe again. This time I'll select the edges. Edges are a little easier to select. Like I said, you can use either the edges or the points to create the polygon, but you can't mix them during the same operation. So now we have these wires made, these lines. Upgrade them to a wire, delete them, upgrade the wire to a face, delete the wire. And how long is this one? Let's make this line into an edge, and it's 1.9. So this one I'll go 2 millimeters to let it go into this wall, so it's not right up against it or too short. We'll extrude it 2 millimeters. Apply. The reason I use apply, sometimes it goes in the other direction from what I'm expecting, and when that happens, I'll undo it, click reverse, apply it again, and then close it. So here's our object, complete with a little bevel to help get it started when you insert it into your little car, your little race car. And then we'll fuse these 3 objects together and do a check geometry. No errors. Check the shape content, make sure you have one solid. because if you have 0 solids, it means one of your wires wasn't connected all the way. So a wire is a collection of connected edges, and you can make a wire that's closed or open. The closed wire, the difference there is the last point, the last end point of the last edge has come back around and connected to the first start point of the first edge, and all the other edges in between are also connected. So it's closed, forms like a closed circuit. The open wire, which would be like the first one I made, which was just these gears here. The open wire can be extruded without error, but it will create a shell instead of a solid. So like a wire is a connection, a wire is a collection of connected edges. A shell is a collection of connected faces. The shell needs to be closed before it can be a solid. So that's just a little lecture on terminology here. We could extrude the wire instead of making it into a face, and we would get the same result. But I like to go ahead and upgrade the wire to a face, because if you don't have some of the edges connected, or if it's not coplanar, in other words, all the edges do not share the same plane, it will not convert to a face, and then you'll see that there's a problem, and you can investigate it at the time. Whereas if you wait until you extrude, you might be fooled, because you might get a nice looking extrude, but it's not really a solid, it's just a shell. So checking with check geometry, we can double check and be sure that we have a solid and not just a shell. Well, that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to tackle a different model, a different object, and we'll look at making circles and arcs and connecting those into wires in that next video. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.